Welcome to the Voices of Impact podcast, where we engage in spirited discourse on the world's most pressing issues with the goal to discover and implement solutions. We are an ambitious youth group, and we will not settle until we have tackled every challenge our world faces.
Previous generations have left us with a host of issues, but the world is ours. Join us as we learn life lessons and how to contribute to a more fair and uplifting planet. We will take the torch from older generations, learning from their mistakes.
We will glean wisdom from the experiences of adults who tried to prevent us from ending up with the issues that we face today, as well as the experiences of adults who, to this day, stand alongside us, fighting the southward progression of many spiraling dilemmas.
Tune in weekly as we approach these many quadrants through the lens of the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, for the planet. Voices of Impact is brought to you by the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education, PPC Profit Pros, and SchoolCAST, a Cloudcast Media program to empower the voices of young students around the world.
Welcome, we're back with another episode all about clean water and sanitation, which was ranked number 6 by our World Council of Youth, including the global youth contributors. This is one of the United Nations UN's 17 Sustainable Development Goals and SDGs, all of which we discussed in Season 1 of Youth.
Today at Voices of Impact, we will discuss clean water and sanitation, ideas for solutions, and innovative work taking place in other countries. I'm Isabella.
I'm Amulya.
I'm Kenneth, and this was Voices of Impact. Greetings, team. We are here once again since our previous episode, number 5, which was about no poverty.
Yeah, I gotta say, we made a huge impact by discussing eradicating extreme poverty, equal access to resources, and resilience to disasters. So definitely check out.
In preparing for today's episode, we've done quite a bit of thinking and research to prepare for our discussion today. Clean water and sanitation.
Now, before we talk too much about the UN, let's introduce our superstar guest here, Professor Goran Bonzinovich. He is a professor at UCSD, along with teaching at SDSU. He is the president and CEO of the Bozinovich Institute, along with a PhD from North Carolina State University and a master's from San Diego State University. And his research it's impressive because he goes into almost everything about how individuals and populations respond to environmental stress at a genetic level. And it's very interesting to see what we're going to talk about today. So clean water and sanitation, it can really be boiled down to a few hurdles, and 3 of which we want to focus on: access to safe drinking water, the second, governance and policy gaps, and last but not least is financial constraints and investment needs. Let's jump into number 1, access to safe drinking water. So when I was researching this, according to the World Health Organization, around 2.2 billion, 27% of people worldwide do not have access to safely managed drinking water services. Luckily, there is a slower downward trend of people not having this, but I really want to talk about why such a big chunk of the population is not able to have access to safely managed drinking water. What are your thoughts, Professor Boz?
Well, yeah, I'm going to actually, so to keep this discussion fun and alive, I wanted to first ask you and your peers how much you're aware of what's going on relative to the access to safe drinking water, both within the United States and internationally. Because depending on what type of region you're talking about internationally, you're going to have a huge range of degrees of this particular problems. Having access to a clean drinking water traditionally oftentimes takes away awareness of what other countries and other populations go through. So how much do you guys think this is a really big issue, and why do you think this is at a number 6 on a UN mandate to do something about it?
Well, I've done my bit of research about, kind of like what are we doing today, together to take action. And I actually found out that there is this program called Water Action Decade where people are joining together, donating funds to try and see if we can find a better way to reach resources to other places that might, be harder to be available and get there. So I think it might be in like the top 10 because it's like a big part of our everyday lives. Without drinking water, we can't really have a lot of energy, we can't function well, and it's a big part of our health mentally and physically. So I think that the importance of it is like really huge. It's like it has a big impact on everyone. So maybe trying to figure out how it can get, more people can access it. I think that would be great.
Well, by the way, for our viewers of Voices of Impact, my name is Charles Parisi, and I'm the CEO of Cloudcast Media. And I'm Kenneth and Isabella and Amulya. Thank you so much for inviting me to sit in on this episode. But Isabella, I think Dr. Goran may have been asking something that I want to probe in a little bit on. Goran, were you saying, are you surprised that it's number 6 and not number 1? Is that really what you were saying?
Well, if you look at their list of priorities, they're all kind of intertwined and connected, right? So technically, you have one really big global issue relative to the state of the environment and how that affects human health, not just human health, but global health. And that one way or the other affects the human health. I'm just wondering, oftentimes what I find out is that if you have access to clean water from the birth, right, you're often not aware of the struggles and difficulties certain populations and individuals have to go through just to access water, not even a drinking water, just to access the water source. And once they do have access to it, the lack of infrastructure that results in a safe drinking water becomes an issue. I mean, this sanitation is another layer of that too. So I just wanted to kind of probe our hosts and younger generation to tell me a little bit about their awareness of just the issue of a safe drinking water around the world, not just the United States or San Diego County or anything like that, but just in general. Because depending on which region you're talking about, you have very different realities. Again, very, very complex issue. This is one of the on the forefronts anywhere in the world, right? Not just because of the scarcity of water that might be coming up, but also the lack of infrastructure that results in a basic human hygiene when it comes to and health maintenance, right? So I just wanted to kind of get an idea of how aware we are of what's going on in the world beyond our neighborhoods, and what do you think the world is doing about that?
Yeah, that's a really, Goran, that's a good probe on your part. So Amulya, Kenneth, and Isabella, because now I'm intrigued. Hey, we know in America we turn on a faucet or we turn off our shower, and we may not be thinking about that infrastructure that gets us what we need, or we need to prepare some food and boil water for vegetables or whatever. What is your understanding of with respect to how the rest of the world maybe actually accesses water
Yeah.
in general?
And for me personally, I think when I think about overall water in general and how lucky I am to have just access to water, just like right from my kitchen, right from my bathroom, right from anywhere in my house, like basically, and it just, from other perspectives in the world, it is just mind blowing how sacred water is. And in, like, for example, like science class and things, they don't really tell you how sacred, like, clean water naturally in the world is. And I think that's definitely needed to be more impacted on the younger generation of how important water is and how some people don't have the basic necessity of clean water for them to drink and use. That's my opinion on it and my awareness.
And for me personally, I feel like a lot of students, their only experience with, say, water sanitation, those types of things is in elementary school, we have
Yeah.
Earth Day, and then we had these little fun activities where we talk about the water cycle and say, oh, the water comes out here, and then here, and here, and here. And then we also talk about pollution, where you always want to go pick up these pieces of trash, or else it's going to be washed along. And I was reading up on your research on the Tijuana estuary and about how the pollution it washes into the estuary and how that changes the environment there. What would you say? Is it an infrastructure problem, or is that more of just, say, with the environment, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's a bit of a controversial issue. This has been going on for 8 decades now or more. And one of the things that we're interested in is looking at the environmental state of the estuary. So, you guys probably know the estuaries are environmental sponges. They are critical for climate, they're critical for many, many different species. This is one of the most biodiverse ecological systems in the world and most dynamic biological systems in the world. And a lot of what is going on relative to urban development, pollution, waste is inadvertently, especially in the large urban areas, washing into that estuary and then and settling in. So one of the things that we're interested in, because of the lack of infrastructure, you're right what you said, topography and multiple sources of contamination, either that being waste or industrial pollution or pesticides from the local farms. What is the state of that environment? What is really in the water and what is in the sediments there, and how much that affects human health, but also how much that affects the ecological health, right? So we're finding things that are really concerning. We found, illegal banned pesticides, herbicides, and other chemical pollutions that are technically banned from production around the world. They're still present there, or those derivatives. You probably know, being a resident of San Diego or San Diego County, that beaches often on the southern part, Imperial Beach or Coronado, get closed uh, because of the pollution problems. I often take my dog down to Coronado to swim, and sometimes when she comes back, she has a runny eyes or she doesn't feel very well. So we technically started avoiding that more and more. So, and this is not even access to drinking water. We're really talking about a state of the environment when it comes to the water quality in general, and what is being, what is washing off and staying in the environment. The problem is that a lot of these chemicals are known carcinogens and mutagens, disruptors for your endocrine system, and a lot of them persist in the environment, and they're really not biodegrading as fast as we would like them to. So that adds additional burden to already strained infrastructure to remove all these things from the water system before they can eventually end up on your dinner plate or the stuff that you use every day. Borders don't really, country borders are irrelevant when it comes to the large water entities. Rivers don't understand borders, oceans don't understand borders, air doesn't really respect the borders. So technically, polluting anywhere kind of goes around. So, like you said earlier, I'm interested in how all these environmental stressors that end up in bodies of water, either freshwater, oceans, or mixed bodies of water like estuaries, because this is a mix of fresh water from a river and ocean tides coming in and out, affect the natural populations, how the species adapt or don't adapt. Sometimes they die out. And then what is the cost of those adaptations? And eventually how that affects human health as well. So it's kind of linked very much to a clean water access. And we have a project coming up where we're partnering with some researchers in Africa looking at the Lake Victoria, which is the second largest lake in the world. We are looking for countries that use the Lake Victoria as a main source of drinking water, where you have often a lack of infrastructure to eventually process that water for consumption and for daily use, right? So one of the things that we're interested in, how the different water samples from different locations in the Lake Victoria affect the liver cells and the three-dimensional models of a human liver, because liver is a major organ where you have enzymes that are eventually expressed to detoxify some of these contaminants that are found in the water, right? And how that eventually changes the immunological profiles of the individuals in the populations. So yes, the issue is pretty complex. It's a definitely international issue. It's not a local issue. We tend to think too locally about these problems instead of talking or trying to solve problems more internationally. What do you guys? So my question to you: how good is your water in San Diego? What do you think?
I'll jump in on that. Aaron Adamson here. Thanks, guys, for having me on. I'm the founder and CEO of PPC Profit Pros, and it quickly. I wouldn't even be able to tell you, because we use mineral water that we have sent to our home, because the smell of the water, I can smell the chlorine. It's like being in the YMCA pool. It's powerful, and I don't want to drink that.
So Kenneth, Amulya, and Isabella, what do you think, or what do you know about the quality, the cleanliness of San Diego
Yeah,
municipal
well,
water?
after you've just explained that complex situation, I feel bad saying that the water's not the best. I feel bad saying that. But the water here is definitely, could be a little bit cleaner, but it's definitely on the brighter side of basically compared to other regions of the world. And I would say for me, it's personally pretty clean, I would say. So no really big problems I see.
Is anybody aware of how the water is reclaimed and processed before you get it through the faucet into your glass or into your cooking pot? Because I find oftentimes a lot of misconceptions about how the water treatment facilities work, how effective they are. And, I just came back recently from Vietnam where technically everybody is just using bottled water. There is no clean water system. You're not supposed to drink water out of their municipal system or just water supply because it's deemed not safe for drinking. But then that exacerbates another problem of pollution because the uh, using plastics and waste just accumulates and it just creates a longer
Well,
term
that's
problem.
so why don't we, Goran, first of all, thank you for the question for the students, because I think that's wonderful to open up the aperture, think a little bit more, back up the lens. So, because I think for the three of you, though all of us know, San Diego is a pretty dry county.
Yes,
There's not a lot of sources of water. You got the Colorado River, but I
right.
think partially what Goran is alluding to, and this might be a good conversation to have, is that how familiar are you with wastewater treatment plants, sometimes known, you ready for this? Toilet to tap technology.
Yeah.
Has anyone heard that phrase before?
Before they answer, I just want to make a disclaimer. I do, and I kind of get criticized for that at home because my family uses the extra filter system and they run the tap water through another kind of a gravity fed filter system before they drink it. I just drink the tap water. I'm fine with it. So and I went to treatment facilities, and I have a advanced degree when it comes to water quality. So um, I do have a faith in the municipal system and a water treatment, and I don't really have a problem necessarily with the quality of a San Diego water. I think people do a very thorough, good job of removing the stuff that should be removed. However, there are unprecedented environmental pressures on the water quality. So that being said, I'd like to go back to what Charles said because I'm interested in kind of hearing from you and trying to get an idea of awareness of the issue and what do you think there are variables that contribute to this and how do we go about it?
Yes, so for me personally, I've been swimming for quite a few years. So when Aaron actually mentioned chlorine, I was like, that's probably like the second most type of water I drink the most whenever I'm swimming. I take a wrong breath and I'm drinking heaps and heaps and heaps of water. And I'm pretty sure it's not that good for my body, but still, I think the San Diego water in my eyes, it's reliable because I've got my mason jar of drinking water right here, and I probably haven't been sick that much as well. So, and I haven't died yet from drinking the water, so I
You
think
shouldn't.
that's a plus for me.
But that's ultimately, I think, a pivot on the global stage, because there are people, in fact, dying from water. Maybe we'll get to that after we delve into San Diego a little bit more. So let's talk about Kenneth and Isabella. What do you know? What do you understand about wastewater treatment and how that works?
Well, first of all, I just want to add that I am not in San Diego, I am in Iowa, but I feel like here the water situation is kind of a little bit different because back when I was in California, I think, for example, the kids didn't really drink from the water fountains as much. I think everyone really just had like bottled water, like their own water bottle and like water that came from home. But like here, it's way different because you actually have like, they're like these machines that you just like put your cup, like your like water bottle in, and it actually has the filter on, and it shows you like what color it is. It goes from red to like yellow and then green, and then you can kind of like see the process of like the water filtering. So like a lot more people do drink water from like water fountains here at my school. So I certainly do think that it also depends like how much water you get. Like California is more of a dry state, so of course that kind of like affects it a little bit more. But I do want to get into the topic of how the water is recycled from the toilet to like tap water, because I think that's a very interesting subject.
Yeah, they try not to use that terminology too much because people don't want to hear that, but toilet to tap is actually up and running in San Diego and probably one of the leaders in the nation, right?
Yeah, that's a correct term. Way back when it failed in a ballot because of the term that was too graphic for people, I think, to process. Yeah, we in San Diego we use reclaimed water, right? And there is a difference between what type of water you use to water golf courses versus for irrigation versus drinking water and so forth. But Charles is absolutely right. It's a little bit, too graphic for some people to process because you start kind of visualizing what's going on. But most of the water in San Diego is reclaimed water out of the necessity, and technology is there. I mean, there is a very comprehensive quality control, quality assurance testing to make sure that what is getting into the homes and through the pipes is technically something that has a minimal risk of affecting health. How many of you think that you could pass the blind test of tasting the differences or recognizing the differences with your senses between the bottled water that costs sometimes up to like $3 a bottle versus the tap water that comes randomly from 5 different places in San Diego? And so if we do the blind test and we just cool the water to the same temperature and you taste it, you think you would be able to tell the differences between a bottled water and a tap water? You can choose the company, whatever company you want, as long as it's not flavored.
For me, I would say, I don't know why, when I drink tap water and bottled water, I could tell the difference. But I would think that I'm pretty sure my brain would trick me. I'm pretty sure it would trick me into saying it's the opposite because I can tell the difference, but I wouldn't be able to know which one's bottled and which one's more qualitative and more, I guess, would be more expensive in that way. So I don't think I'll be able to do it.
Charles, I think we should do the test eventually, and then
That might actually be a fun extension of
Yeah.
Voices of Impact, Kenneth, Isabella, and Amulya to do a water taste test. I know for sure I could not tell the difference. I drink tap water, and Aaron, for your benefit, I drop in my little Mio flavor enhancers. So if I'm in a strawberry mango mood, I get a little strawberry mango water because I'm happy with tap water. But I guess the question I would have is, Isabella, let me ask you a question because you've said something. I'm a marketing guy. Green, yellow, green light, red light, yellow light, letting you know that the filtration is working. Okay. So now the light sensor is working, but what if they don't change the internal filters? Does the light still matter?
I never really thought about that because it's always been like, just trust the light. So I've never really thought about whether they change the filters or not. But, this is actually a very interesting story. I'll get to my point quickly. Back when I was in Chile, my school actually had a really big problem with the water. There weren't actually a lot of water fountains. And, the school trying to bring your more awareness about that, we did a field trip into like a science research center. And then they taught us how to make your own filter from like a water bottle. I'm not sure if you guys have seen it, where you do like cotton and then you do like sand and then there's like multiple layers that you do to like just like a simple like water bottle, and then like it filters and then it's actually like drinkable, and you do the test and it's actually really clean water. So actually I do have a question for our guest. Since it's actually kind of cheap, considering how like kids from like our age could make their own filter, how is it possible that maybe other kids that have the same resources aren't able to like have their own clean water? Because if technically the resources are there and it's just the problem of them being able to access it better, then why is it such a big problem to actually get them to access it, if they have the resources needed?
do you mean that because the filtration system is stratified and relatively simple, so the technology, like you said, is multi-layer filtering to remove solids, most of the larger molecules and so forth, why aren't people just using it almost as a kits in order to filter their own water?
Yes.
Self-made kits. I think we're talking about now regions that have a slew of problems where filtering your own water is almost a luxury, both when it comes to time, when it comes to setting up the system where you just simply have enough discipline and enough. I don't even know. It's almost not even a reality for some people to have it in their daily routines to afford pushing the water through the system. So I always thought that this was a responsibility of the governments and the municipality, but again, different regions of the world deal with the very different realities. And now the problem is that they're all larger bodies of water and eventually smaller resource sources of water are getting more and more strained. They're becoming more and more contaminated over time. And so the difficulty of simply purifying the water is more challenging. Um, so, although you're right, you might get a significant improvement in water quality relative to even a homemade, relatively simple contraptions to drink the water, there is always a possibility for infectious agents to get through, for chemicals that are seeping through, you know, uh, activities around there. So if you have a farming, if you have anything that is going on where you're using pesticides, herbicides that are cheap, they're not really necessarily safe and healthy, it becomes a bit overwhelming, right? To get all that stuff removed. And then you end up with the chronic exposures. But that's a great point because you're right. I mean, do you know, by the way, how expensive are the even the gravity filters that people run their water through locally? People who just have them at home. Have you guys ever looked at the prices on Amazon or anywhere if you're going to buy an extra filter for your home so you can run your tap water through another set of filters so it can be cleaner? One of those that remove 99.99 something percent of contaminants. Has anybody looked that up?
Is a home health filter? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, sometimes they
The
have
whole
these
house?
the metal big jar things that.
Yeah, aren't they several thousand?
Well, actually, I haven't. I was looking for one of them because I'm trying to do a little bit more camping and being out in the wild and kind of literally scooping the water from the creek and running it through if I have to, right? And there's some other filters that are you can just attach to the drinking bottles and so forth. Ends up being a little pricey over time. So,
Mm-hmm.
and this is already available to you. Think about places that are more economically challenged, right? When you're just trying to get through the motion of surviving through the day, and that filtering the water.
Yeah, because yeah, Isabella, you do bring up a good point. I mean, they actually have even in the military in survival training. There's filtration devices and filtration straws you can use. So there's some of those devices are there. Part of the challenge, I think, Isabella, is the countries other than an emergency where you need to clean the water, filter the water. So many of the countries that have a just simply don't have access to the water, or they're walking 10 miles to get a jug of water. So some of the countries where they may need to have the water cleaned, is they also have an access issue and introduction. Let me ask you a question though, because going back to this issue of toilet to tap technology and everything, I want to ask our esteemed guest here, Goran, and the three of you to maybe talk for a second about. I've heard this said, and Goran, maybe you'll tee it off. I've heard it said that ocean and river health is human health.
I'm gonna let our hosts actually get into this because I think I can talk about this for a week without stopping. So I'm gonna be very careful what I do here. But I'll give you one highlight later. But I would like to hear what you guys have to say because I'm always interested in young people's perspective on these things. What do you think
So
about the phrase "ocean health is a human health" or "river health is a human health"? It's a real reflection of technically our own health. What do you think about that?
So on like the first thought basis of when I hear the words ocean health and river health is human health as well. I think of like the water cycle and about how like the water comes from the ocean. And since we're in San Diego, I love the ocean. And that's almost what I think about half the time. So whenever I'm going there and I see like those pollution things like that, I'm assuming that if there's like pathogens and things like that, the people that go there, they like get like quote unquote infected and then they would go to their houses and then yada 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 go from there. Or like their water, I would assume is I would assume that there's some way that we can get the salt water and turn it into drinking water. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there's going to still be some like revenues, especially when you said like it's probably a marketing thing, but when it says gets rid of 99.98% of like germs and things like that, there's still that like pesky little 0.0 that makes their way into like the water system. So if inherently the place where we get our water is contaminated, then since water is so essential to life, and I would assume that that's how that kind of affects our health. Am I going around the right lines here?
Charles, what do you think? I have a comment, but I just want to kind of get everybody else's.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say that, well, I think you're certainly moving in the right direction, Kenneth. And I would say that, but as we dig deeper, because I think that's, at the surface level, sure, absolutely. Because remember, it's not just, I keep it simple. Here's my take. The two things, as I understand, that a human being can't live for long without is oxygen and water, right? We can actually get by without Doritos or a soda, or maybe a great pizza from Papalecco in San Diego. But the two things we actually can't live without, we're not taking care of, is my observation. And then even the climate, which things that drop in the ocean, right, are also affecting us. But it's not just that, it's food. If 70% or more of our planet is water, and I try to keep it simple, that's why I'm here to listen to Goran as well, and hear the three of you. And then we consume so much food from the oceans. I've got to believe there's some connection between the rise of all of these illnesses, cancers, environmental, autoimmune diseases. I don't know, but I think a lot of it is in fact connected to we're not taking care of our water. That's
And that's interesting that you talk about that because I remember seeing this diagram or something like that where it talks about how there's pesticides being used to grow more crops and things like that. But ultimately, those pesticides are getting washed into the water, and then that water is being used to grow the crops again. And it's that weird, never-ending cycle of maybe those like non-biodegradable things are building up and up and up, and we don't realize it, and we're only looking at the numbers of I feel like a lot of people, like a lot of farmers, are looking how much of this can I sell and how much can I make, and that's why they actually use the pesticides in the first place. So it's interesting to see how that cycle goes.
well, yeah. I think the other thing I would throw on the table for everyone to think a little bit about is, Goran said something very very important right from the get go, and I made a mental note of it. And I think part of the reason why the UN has made it an issue as a sustainable development goal is water, the oceans, the rivers. They don't respect this human construct called boundaries, sovereign nation, artificial borders. Those things called rivers and oceans have no idea what we're talking about. So imagine from the water's perspective, if the water could comment on us humans, I think they'd find a lot of what we do kind of silly. That we don't treat this as our water, our collective food, because we've got to fix it for the planet. And I would even argue it's happening at the state level. How many different states are drawing on the Colorado River? You've got different regulations by state. The Colorado River doesn't know anything about Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, and California. It's a foreign concept to the water. And so I think one of the issues that Goran's hitting upon here is this is truly, it's not a local issue. It's not a national issue. It's not an international issue. It's a global issue because what happens to waters, if I understand how waters flow around the planet, Goran, something happening right now in Chile or Asia, could be impacting all of us, is impacting all of us. That's what I think.
No, it's a really important point for young people to really wrap their heads around, because to think about the example of having a very industrially powerful country setting up the mining operation very close to the banks of the river, and a lot of the pollution that comes from mining ends up washing into the river. That flows downstream into another country. So the receiving country by default with no fault of their own, is receiving already a compromised water quality and a huge burden of having to deal with those type of contaminants that are known to be a big problem for human health. And then Kenneth, you talked about pesticides and food. I mean, this is kind of just the tip of the iceberg, and you're absolutely right. Bioaccumulation, biomagnification, all means that technically, if the ecosystem gets exposed to that, it will end up exposing you one way or the other, because it will end up on your dinner plate. If it's accumulating in a tissue, it's accumulating in your food. Eventually, you're getting exposed. And if it's not regulated, and if there's no oversight of it, you can continuously getting prolonged exposures that might adversely affect your health. One of the examples is the antibiotic resistant gene. Right. So, people love to go on a weekend, get a burger, get a hot dog, whatever it is. Where does it come from? And if we have a market economy where the goal is to maximize the output and grow that baby calf to as big of a cow as fast as you can without getting sick, and you keep pumping it with antibiotics and artificially trying to keep it healthy, eventually all that stuff ends up exposing you. And now we're looking routinely for antibiotic resistant genes in the environment, not even bacteria or other species, but we're actually looking for the things that are not really good in the long run for immune system. They're eventually you're getting fed because we have a very different priorities. That, in addition to the grazing issues of what type of soil we use, what type of water we use to, make it access to the livestock and all this other stuff. So it's a cumulative problem. You can't look at it isolation and just point to one thing and say, this is a really big issue. You have to look at it as a systems problem, right? International problem, and then pick the battles and try to make things better. Do you guys know who is one of the most, I guess, known people in the world who has made sanitation and water quality one of the biggest issues of, I'm going to give you 50-50 here, his kind of involvement and agenda, and he's not investing, but really trying to raise awareness and give money back to try to improve the water quality and issues around the world.
I'm gonna
Kenneth,
be
what type
honest
of
with you.
computer do you use?
I don't have a clue of who that
What
is.
computer? Do you have a PC or a Mac?
I have a PC.
Okay. So I'm just giving you a hint there.
That was a good clue. So you may know
So
the
is
answer.
it's related?
He famously came to a meeting, to a public presentation, and he's a guy that gets a lot of attention, and took a jar of technically human feces to demonstrate why this is such a huge problem.
This
PC
doesn't work.
guy, Mac versus
Oh,
PC guy.
And he
I'm
Huh?
thinking.
he was the PC guy. Okay, let's give him a hint. First name is Bill.
We're talking about Bill
He
Gates.
took a jar of feces?
Yeah, to demonstrate the problem, to eventually get people's attention of how much lack of sanitation, because I think this is part of your topic too today, is if you took care of the sanitation worldwide, how much would you alleviate the problem of water quality around the world, human health in general, lifespan, quality of life, anything that is. He was trying to demonstrate how much of the problems are actually under the umbrella of water quality and water quantity in the world too. So, so people care, and people, a lot of people really understand the problem, but the pace of, the industrial development and urbanization, manufacturing, buying things that we don't need, spending time on gathering things from Amazon that we shouldn't have, and all this other stuff eventually perpetuates the problem, right? And it ends up in your water one way or the other.
Yeah, but I think, Goran, let me ask you a question. Partially what you're alluding to here with the Bill Gates connection is it's not just this industrialization that's impacting water, but it's also this basic thing called humans and sanitation.
Yep. Yeah.
Even if you fixed all the industrialization issues that are polluting waters, everyone was on their best behavior.
Yeah.
Humans managed to compromise. We still have another issue, which is what Bill Gates is saying.
Right. Right. And it's that lack of infrastructure that, like Isabella said, is not, it is challenging, but it is not unsurmountable when it comes to, focusing on the right thing, having access to toilets, having wastewater facilities. They don't have to be necessarily super, super sophisticated to start improving the situation in many places in the world, right? So, when you don't have a good sanitation, when you don't have environmental services, when you're technically dumping your waste one way or the other right into the body of water that you use to collect water from, to bathe and to cook for your meals and stuff like that, that becomes one of the not very desired cycles, right? And it becomes really a problem.
And I have a question. Is there, for Dr. Bozinovich, is there a, coming out of Bill Gates's work and so on, is there a sanitization solution, to your point, that has been put forward as maybe simpler, but quite effective and more on the inexpensive side for governments to put in place for their citizens, that they should be putting in place? They should be aware of some new technologies.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I think they're pretty practical. Just having the technically better sanitation, including just the toilets, access to the toilets, right? And eventually managing the waste, where the waste is just kind of concentrated and eventually processed, is a huge win and a huge effect, not just direct human health, right, relative to exposure to pathogens and unsanitary water, but also for the ecology and the environment, which eventually comes back. So I think there are many proposals for more elegant solutions that are, if you look at it on a paper, more affordable. But right across the border from here, we're dealing with the same issue for 8 decades, when there is not enough infrastructure to keep up with the urbanization and the population growth to manage the waste that it's eventually washing off right into the environment. So, you can argue that sometimes the growth in human activity is just really to keep up with. Sometimes we need to slow down. Sometimes we need to reallocate our resources, but that's not always a desired effect for the outcome for the individual. So it becomes tricky. It's a challenge. It's a huge challenge worldwide. Charles, you probably know the water rights issues. If you even isolate just the issue with the Colorado River, and states kind of positioning themselves relative to who has certain water rights, who gets what, how much is allocated. Those are going to be very contentious issues. They are already, but they're going to be super contentious, not just in the United States, but everywhere. Some people say some of the most contentious issues will revolve around water and water access in the world.
Yeah, there's a for our young voice of impactors, and I commend you for this amazing show you've created. There's an old saying: whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. And
I think,
we can't survive without water. You might even be able to argue we could live with bad air, as Los Angeles and other cities have shown. We might be able to live. Well, I would say this is we can live with bad air longer than we can live with no water. So this human beings negotiating water drawdowns in Colorado, and I would encourage you to understand this, because to the extent that we want to learn how to work well with our global neighbors, we haven't been able to figure that out with our state neighbors. And
right.
there's been some real fighting about, Arizona getting hit with a 20% drawdown while California didn't get hit. And then that's why the federal government is stepping into it, because 4 states can't solve an issue. So it's a big issue. And I always go back to the same thing, Amulya, Kenneth, and Isabella. I have tremendous confidence in your young generation, but we do have to learn how to compromise and learn how to, I don't have to love the solution, but I have to be able to live with it. If all we ever get is what we love, we're never going to reach compromises, and we're going to have to compromise, because I think the key problem for a lot of these issues, certainly water and sanitation, it's almost even not a science issue, it's a human problem, because we can't figure out how to compromise, cooperate, collaborate, and recognize that we all own the problem. Going back to Goran's original point, this water has no concept of what those four states are fighting over, nor does it care.
So I'm wondering, I wanted to ask you, young panelists on the call. By the way, Charles, I use metaphors like you do sometimes in the class, and I realize that my students can relate to them, like a whiskey and water thing. So,
Well,
but
yes, fortunately, none of our young impactors are.
well, they were
Yeah,
smiling,
correct.
so I think that they went along with it, which is really nice. I'm wondering if you ever talk to does that ever come up as a conversation, being this young? Is there any kind of an awareness going on in among your peers? And the second one is, has anybody even considered doing something education wise or career wise that might have to do with becoming an expert and helping with these type of issues? Because this is, like Charles says, this is going to be a hugely charged emotional issue as well, not just the practical. Because once you start really compromising a resource that equates life, right? Things get very tricky. So I'm just wondering if your peers are aware of the issue, and if so, what kind of conversations are you having, with your friends relevant to this, or are we just just a little too young to deal with these problems, and it's just kind of getting through the school and planning for the future.
Yeah, in school they don't really exactly tell us that we have great water, and they don't really compare us to other regions or other places in the world. They do tell us little facts though that lead to like, oh, how important water is. Like there's some statistic that 70% of the world is made out of water, and only a very little bit, a minimal amount of that 70% is true clean water. That's a statistic that they always like mention and say in our science class and just overall in school classes. And with my peers, I think like I don't think they mostly young peers, our younger generation doesn't grasp the idea of how powerful water, the basic necessity we need to live, is, and how important it is like that we need. So that's definitely a little bit of an issue about how for us personally in 8th grade we don't really get taught that like, oh, this is something you should value, this is something that other people don't have.
So
That's a really, Amulya, I'm glad you said that because see, what is really cool about Goran as well, and let me say this from my personal experience of the three of you. I think part of the issue, Amulya, is we're just teaching the basics of water is. It's H2O. Here's where it comes from. Blah 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 blah. That's why, Kenneth, I'm happy to hear that you want to study economics and psychology, which to me is called behavioral economics. Classical economics says here's how people should behave. Behavioral economics says, forget all that. This is actually how humans do behave. I think the solving of world problems is about human behavior and behavioral economics and bringing some semblance of rationality to irrational human beings because we are irrational human beings. The key is how do we inject some rationality? And I think that's the kind of thing at the educational level, Goran and Amulya and Aaron and Kenneth, Isabella, that I think that'd be a better way to approach the whole discussion of water. We know it's H2O. How much time do we need to spend on that one? The key is how do we ultimately see? Amulya, you said 70% of the world is water. I think I said that earlier, so I agree with that. But 60% of the human body approximately is also water. So I keep things simple. If the world is water and we're mostly water, then it's got to be impacting us. And I don't, so let's figure it out. We've had this huge spike in all kinds of health issues, certainly in America, and we're a wealthy nation. And so I think a lot of it is connected to the thing water. We are water. So I think going back to the point is ocean health and river health, is it in fact human health? And so again, maybe that's how we should be approaching the world of education, Goran and Isabella and Kenneth and Aaron. That how do we cooperate? Let's have a little game theory conversation because we end up always with the lose-lose cell instead of the win-win cell.
That's a great point, Charles. I just wanted to jump in on that. The global nature of water and it's all ours and everything. I live in San Diego now, but I'm Canadian and there's huge, vast amounts of lakes and rivers and clean water in Canada. And I want to put this to the students, like what's the opportunity there? What should we be doing as nations with each other. If there's a nation that has a great deal of clean water, what could we do with when if we're coming from a nation that has huge areas that are dry or have problems with their water?
I think the biggest thing that we can kind of strive for is to kind of take into account of both what Mr. Parisi and Mr. Adamson are saying, that the whole reason of why I kind of want to study the behavioral economics is that I find that people, they fought over, like, there's desires for a long time, like before a long time ago we would fight over salt, and right now we would think salt is just something we can just get, and that it's a condiment that almost every household had. But before, nations would fight over that little thing, and now I'm glad to see that I have something else to research about, where water is something that seems so, how do I say it, so simple. It causes for there to be such big discussions about, because of the impact that it just has of, I would say it's almost necessary for life. And I'm a little bit worried about when we think about what do we do with the nations that have a lot of water, and how do we get that to people that don't have a lot of water. I think in like the 1900s here in California, people would burn their crops even though they had an excess of it, just to keep the prices at market level, and so that the farmers, they would be able to still maintain their profits, and there'll be a bunch of families that were moving from the Midwest to California. They would see that these crops are being burned, and there would be pesticides sprayed on them. And it's what I want to say is, in my hopeful mind, is that we're able to equitably get these people that need water the amount of water that they have. So my question is, how can we kind of gather together the public side, which in my eyes is the government, those public sectors, along with the private side, more of those profit seeking, those people, to kind of band together to make sure the right people, and by right people I just mean everyone gets the right amount of water that they need.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Well, I'll take a shot at that because I think it's not even science based, and this is why I'm always an advocate. As an individual, as for our company, Kenneth, Isabella, and Amulya, to power up opportunities like this and what you're doing as with Voices of Impact, to collaborate, communicate, and try to always find the win-win. And that means, human beings that have to learn how to, get along, and particularly getting along. My rule number 3 for life, shared with my daughter before she went to college, is learn how to cooperate, collaborate, succeed with people you don't even like. I think that's one of the answers to all of the problems in the world. We don't have to necessarily like everyone, but we have to see the mission. We're all one team. And then how do we accomplish the mission? And I think water is one of those key things we have to be tackling. There's another issue, because it could be a whole nother episode. Population growth. And I would encourage the three of you maybe to dig up a New York Times article from a couple of months ago. You know, if the same if the next 3 or 4 billion humans on the planet, and that's coming in very short order, we're going from 8 billion to 10 billion to 12 billion in a relatively short period of time. If we continue to consume the same type of food, if the food system doesn't change much, it is actually not sustainable. You cannot feed another 4 billion humans with the same food system, assuming they have similar diets. Great article, a lot of science around it. And there's water issues. Everything from what do we eat, what do we plant, the groundwater drain, pulling of the groundwater. So there's a lot of issues connected to this little thing called water. But the best science in the world is still going to require the best science in a word not applied, the best food systems in the world not applied, will never work unless the human beings are communicating, collaborating, and cooperating. Thus, I love game theory and behavioral economics and teaching young people civics and civil conversations.
Well, that's what I think. Like what Kenneth wants to do, and Isabella, and Mila, what are you planning to do with like what are your aspirations when you go to college? What are you going to study there?
Mulia?
For me,
Yeah,
Amulya.
Amelia, sorry.
for I would into computers, so most likely in coding and modern technology and things like that.
Okay, so economics, and then Isabella, what are you aspiring to do eventually?
I want to be a robotic engineer.
Robotic engineer, coding, and then Kenneth, economics, right?
That's correct.
So let's say we had an emergency summit and you are experts in your own field, but you're not really directly dealing with the water issue. However, we communicate effectively to you that this is a pressing thing, but we need to borrow your expertise to eventually try to alleviate the problem. How would you incentivize people to take better care of environment relevant to the water quality using some of those skills that you're eventually going to develop? It's an unfair question because you don't have all the resources and training, right, experience yet. But how would you use economics or robotics or data science and coding and communication to eventually incentivize people to really pay attention to the problem and change or influence some behavior that will result in alleviating this problem? Just some wild ideas. Anything goes. Anything is fine.
So for me, I think I'll set up, because I think humans are nowadays, they're very short-term thinking. So I would set up a system where they're simply just punished and rewarded based on their actions towards the problem, or so to say, like a general problem is water sanitation, or we're having issues with people putting their trash away to where they actually need to put away. And I think the biggest problem right now is that people feel like they can get away with just putting trash on the ground, and the punishment, it's there, the law is there, but it is not 100% enforced. Even if it's 90% enforced, there's that 10% chance of, or sometimes the punishment isn't even hard enough where people think, I would much rather just throw it away here than spend, say, an extra like 40 minutes, hypothetically, another 40 minutes trying to find this out. I'd much rather just go into the day and even just pay the fine. So for me, just
Yeah.
setting up a
It's
system.
I'll tell you, it's a really, Goran has given you an extraordinary good question and topic to be thinking about, because that word incentives and human beings always respond to incentives. And I would even tell you, Kenneth, that I would argue Goran can address this better than I, because he teaches genetics, which is a very, very difficult class in general if it's taught well.
I'm
And it's
reading between the
complex.
lines there, Charles.
If it's taught well, it's a very complex class. But here's what I would say, Kenneth. I think humans have always been short-term oriented. We're not genetically wired for retirement savings, or things 30 and 40 years out. I think we're genetically wired for surviving the night and not getting eaten by a wild animal. And so we just have the modern applications of that. Hey, short-term gratification. Let me go to the mall this weekend. It's not terribly different than our ancestors. They just didn't have malls. I think we were always wired for short-term gratification. So Gordon's really challenging you, with a really, really important question. And one of the things I would ask the three of you. So let's talk about reward and punishment. Because let's truth be told, there's not enough police officers. There's not enough fines you can write. There's not enough enforcement officers for sanitation violations to ever really make an impact if people don't have an internal moral compass and an ethos. Because it's not like we can hire 1 million people to go write tickets for everyone that violates. The key here is, does there need to be some kind of internal, self motivated moral compass that guides human beings?
I personally believe that I don't really think punishing people right now, like nowadays, is the best really way to go, because right now people usually, even though they get punished, maybe teachers get detention or something like that. Nowadays kids are really just like, they don't really think far ahead into their futures, so they kind of like dismiss it and be like, it's just like one day of detention, it doesn't really matter that much. So I think that our best shot at actually solving and like communicating with each other is maybe like involving more people, maybe like making, I don't know, like for example, making more trips around the world, maybe universities collaborating together and be like, maybe exchange students, kind of things like that, and make them, with their own eyes see how big the problem is and how much impact it has on all of us. So I think maybe more involvement and more like maybe more, I don't know how I should word this, kind of like more incentive, like, not just somebody telling them to like, oh, go learn about this, but them taking the initiative to go learn about it. I think that's the most important thing.
How much do you think that preemptive education plays a role in this? And what do you think would be an impact of a visit to a local water treatment facility plant followed by a week trip or 2 week trip to a region that deals with this issue directly? That viscerally, physically to this, and learning about this in a very real way instead of highlighting the paragraph on your iPad that somebody told you to read, versus meeting people of your age who are as smart as you are, but having less resources or less fortunate, and having those experiences early in life when you are intimately dealing or getting familiar with a problem that somebody else is dealing. Do you think that that could have a long term impact on your decision making and your awareness in the communication, or do you think that it's better than nothing but it's still not good enough?
I believe that is extremely important because I think most, people and adults can relate to like that one teacher they had in their childhood that kind of like did things differently, had like more fun projects, did, had a different teaching method. And I think that that's also part of what sparks creativity because you're like, oh wow, this teacher does things differently, like, and then you get more interested in it, you're involved, and then you're like, oh wow, and then you start asking more questions, you get curious. So I think, starting and sparking that curiosity from early on, like early in the stages, like from elementary, middle school, is really important because then that kind of like develops their interest. And that's what later on in their future, they're like, you know what, I remember this project I did long ago, I want to study this. And I think that maybe if we had the youth being more involved in like big problems like this, like water and our health, it would be very helpful.
So if I want to take you three to Kenya for 2 weeks to deploy the sensors in Lake Victoria and measure the impact of a pollution and urbanization and waste and how that affects people and liver cells and genetics and immunity, no problem. You're signing on and we're going.
Yep, I'm up for it.
Great. That's
So
great.
where's the sign
That's
up
the
sheet
spirit
again?
we need. It's unfortunate that we are passing on, and Charles knows, and sadly, and Aaron know what that means. We're kind of passing the buck, and you're going to be the ones dealing with this problem as much or more than we do. It's kind of it is very, it's fun to talk to you about this, but in another way, I'm kind of like a little bit disappointed with my generation that we're putting you in this situation. A lot disappointed, not a little bit, but a lot disappointed, right? But I think you're right. I think those experiences very early on is where you learn more than some kind of a distant, is this going to be on a test kind of a, conversation. So I wish our school system implemented these experiential learning opportunities, not just, technical and skills or whatever, but really developing empathy and awareness of how the world works from a, early age, and just trying to figure out if some of those experiences will actually influence you to contribute and make a difference.
Yeah. I think it's really important. I'm so glad that you brought this up, Gordon. And Isabella, I love your input and answer on that one. So I want to share something. And Kenneth, I'm not sure how much longer you're going on this particular episode, but I want to mention this, and I'm going to circle back to almost where Goran started. Because look at our globe right now, okay? And compare it to the globe and borders 200 years ago, 300 years ago, 400 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. You know what really hasn't changed? The rivers and the oceans, but the borders keep moving. And as humans, who keep moving those borders. The key is the water knows none of this. We all own the water issues in this planet. So the cooperation, not competition, because of these human constructed artificial lines that keep changing, like water running over sand. Because I'm pretty sure 200 years from now, the current globe and these sovereign nations and their borders, it will not be the same, but the rivers and oceans will.
And I think for me, the just listening to this, the saddest thing about it is there are a lot of students that want to become, say, computer scientists or those types of things just for the money aspect. They want to have a comfortable life. They see all these figures. Like even amongst my friends, half the things that they talk about is, oh, I'm gonna go to this school. I'm gonna study computer science. I'm gonna get this job. It's gonna pay me this amount of money by my first year, and they're solely motivated by that money thing, and then they don't really have that internal locus of, oh, I really enjoy this. It's more of, I really enjoy this because it gives me the money and it forces me to enjoy it, so just so I can get better at it. So
Well, this goes back to the cooperation and the communication. Again, here we are. We have Isabella in Iowa. You know, we're all from different parts of this, even this country, North America. Aaron, Canada. I'm from the East Coast. You know, Goran is from Europe. And there's no reason, even with modern technology, that we couldn't be doing this with students all over the planet right now and dropping kids from all over the world using Zoom and virtual technology so you can actually communicate and cooperate and get to understand that everything that something's happening in Europe impacts us when it comes to water and the environment. So, yeah, but here's what I would say, Kenneth, and I think this is important too. And Goran hit the nail on the head. Our generation, I think, has created the greatest generation of problem solvers, meaning the three of you, because we've left you a lot of problems to solve. I am always eternally confident. And yes, I understand being sad and sometimes being concerned and wondering what's next. But the key here is every problem is not really a problem, it's an opportunity for improvement, OFI. And I believe your generation is going to be the greatest problem solvers that have ever walked this planet or flown this planet or used your drones to get around, whatever you're going to do. I have tremendous confidence in you, which is why I also believe why I'm here, Aaron's here, and Goran is here today to contribute to your amazing project called Voices of Impact, because we have left you a problem, multiple problems. That's why you're going to be the greatest problem solvers ever.
Yeah, I want to chime in on that. I think you guys are going to be you're our hope, and you've got fantastic tools, AI coming along, and things that you'll be able to use to try to solve these problems. But I wanted to tie in a couple of things. One thing that Kenneth, you said that a lot of your peers are looking at, choosing careers based on money, and that's their kind of focus. And then something, that Dr. Bozinovich said that intrigued me, which was, what if we took you to Kenya and we did some water sampling and showed you the impact of pollution on the water and so on? And you guys were like, sign me up. You got excited. Maybe one, we've left problems, but two, we're maybe not doing a good job for the new generation of showing them the problems, like in their face. And then if we did a better job of that, Kenneth, maybe you and your peers would go, I thought I wanted that money and that computer job over here, but I feel now compelled to solve that problem. That water problem is making me sick to my stomach of what's happening to humanity and the planet. And I don't care if the money, hopefully maybe the money comes one day, but I got to solve that, because morally I can't stand by and watch that happen. I have to jump in.
Yeah, it's an inward versus outward thinking. And the more outward you look and experience, the more you tend to think that way. And ultimately, like you said, it becomes more rewarding because you're really spending your life trying to make a difference and lending your time and expertise and your commitment to problems that are really not going away and they're going to affect everybody. So think about it, being at the party and somebody says, "What do you do for a living?" And you say, "Well, I'm trying to solve the global water problem." You're the guy I want to talk to at the party. You know what I mean? But before you try to solve any problems, just make sure that you stay friends with Aaron, because our partnership with Canada is critical, and there's no messing around there. So just keep your friends close. It's really important.
And your
Sorry,
enemies
Kenneth.
closer.
You said Canadian. I was like, I gotta slide it in somehow there. You don't want to ruffle your best friends because there's just no reason for it.
It might be frozen, but there's a lot of water there.
You know what? I don't get me going. I'm just like just from fact, just do a flyover and see how much water is actually trapped in Canada, and maybe that's your best friend. You just have to be careful what you say. It's pretty
And
crazy, but anyhow.
and to just end off this episode, I feel like we've had so many good conversations, and I just wanted to ask one last final question in the spirit of we're talking about the new generation. And in this podcast, we really want to talk about actionable steps that students can take. So, in your eyes, Professor Boz, what are some of the everyday things, or how can someone get started to kind of learn more about these water issues or initiatives that they can get their hands on?
Right, that's a great question. And I think that in today's business, how overwhelmed young students are with just information noise and trafficking and distractions, that's a huge challenge. That's really that starting point is really difficult. That's what I'm talking about. Is like experiential learning. I think that our education system needs a big overhaul. That's one thing, and really teaching concepts to a problem, using the problems, like Charles said. You guys are talented. You're smart. If you're put in a correct environment, like the rest of the people said on this podcast, and this is not trying to be nice to you, the data shows that if you present the problem to young people, both their age and enthusiasm and the natural curiosity will go after a problem very effectively. I think that we underestimate our younger generation. Unfortunately, we don't communicate the way that you deserve to be communicated with, in a way. But I think that seeking your own opportunities for experiential learning is really critical. Look things up. Try to find the organizations, companies, institutes, anything out there that is dealing with a problem. Start reading. There's a plenty of information out there. Even start with the documentary movies and get excited about what the people around the world are documenting and trying to communicate. And then don't be shy to contact those people. There is something really cool. I mean, get really excited when I get a cold email from a student saying, "Hey, I'm really upset about what's going on. I want to do something about it. I'm really not sure where to start, but I've heard that you're doing something. Are there any other opportunities that you can point me to that I can learn more about?" Sometimes demand from your teachers to have a guest speakers, ask them to have a theme and say, "Hey, we're doing this, part of the course. Wouldn't it be wonderful to bring us somebody who is willing to talk to us about A, B, and C?" Try to almost force those interactions. The next one is a self-organization too, which is, I was approached a while ago from a group of students from Los Angeles who wanted to write a grant about improving STEM readiness for students who want to go in a healthcare, and they felt that their school system wasn't adequate enough to prepare them for STEM topics, particularly for marginalized students. And they reached out, and then we wrote a grant with them, right, to eventually get those opportunities. So self-organization is a great tool. There's a lot of information out there seeking out experts who do this, and I guarantee you people who are in this battle and they are really passionate about it will be very empathetic and enthusiastic to either lend good advice or provide some direction and get you to engage, right? So seeking things out, just say, science, the careers, environmental science, water quality issues. You can even say institutes dealing with biodiversity, right? And you can just start there. It's a Pandora's box. You just keep going from one place to another, seek out experts, and don't be shy to communicate. If this something like this bothers you, just be as frank, as direct as you can be, and say that you're really looking for opportunities to learn more and contribute. And I think people will engage with you readily.
Wow, that truly is powerful because I mean, most of the things that I'm doing, even this, it wouldn't have happened if I didn't go outside my house and like talk to someone. And just thank you so much for the advice. And
Old school, right? Easy stuff. Talk to people.
Mr. Parisi talks about that a lot too, where we have to just go out and just talk to people, and the things that happen, just getting to know people is actually just amazing.
Charles is one of the most authentic and influential community leaders for young people that I've ever been around. Charles does more for community when it comes to education and exposure than most of the educators that I come across with. So I can't even tell you how lucky I am to know him and to work with him on certain things. And it's, you guys are in great hands, and he's just a pleasure to be around and gives great advice and a lot of really, really cool exposure. So yeah, it's been fun.
Goran, that was very kind of you. Thank you very much.
That's understatement. You know that.
And Amulya, Isabella, Mr. Adamson, Mr. Parisi, for today's talk, I think, is amazing. Viewers, listeners, we'll be back next time, next week, for more jams. Thank you for listening to
We hope you enjoyed the Voices of Impact podcast, where we engage in spirited discourse on the world's most pressing issues with the goal to discover and implement solutions.
Our mission is to overcome global and societal conundrums through student unification, accepting our roles as future stewards of planet Earth. Please consider sharing this episode with other humans to enable spirited youth discourse on the planet's most pressing issues.
If you learned something or felt empowered by this episode, tune in Saturdays for more student-led change-making conversations, and be sure to follow, share, and positively rate our show.
Voices of Impact is brought to you by the University of San Diego's Jacobs Institute for Innovation in Education, PPC Profit Pros, and SchoolCAST, a Cloudcast Media program to empower the voices of young students around the world.